and what we do to support them in the time of refocusing, of retirement. Stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Throughout our community, we recognize those who have retired. During the springtime, we say to them, we admire you, we're grateful for you, and we're glad that you're a part of the continuing process of living your life and serving within the community. But on Austin Faith Dialogue today, we want to focus particularly upon those who are retired religious, or those who work with the retired religious, and how they might go about that process of redefining their faith commitment in those golden years of life. That maybe their goal is not simply to go out on the golf course, but to find other ways of expressing their life and their identity. Sister Marie Andre Walsh is a vicar for the religious in the Austin Diocese, and Dr. Robert Hofferkamp is a seminary professor who has served the Lutheran tradition, and we welcome both of you to Austin Faith Dialogue. Sister, you have been an educator during your years of service within the church. I think you said you made your commitment your profession and have been involved in your community for how many years?
55 years.
55 years. And I said to you before we came on the air that you have lots of charisma, sister. I can see where you have enjoyed, you've enjoyed your years. That's right. And Dr. Hofferkamp, you have been serving your denomination, your tradition for how many years?
Close to 43 years. Yes, this year it will be 43.
And both of you have reached that time that some describe, as I mentioned, the golden years of life, but they can also be very frightening years of life, that there are those who find themselves not knowing how to redirect themselves. You mentioned also, Dr. Hofferkamp, that your service was in Latin America, is that correct?
Almost entirely, yes, in 4 countries, Guatemala, Mexico, and then 2-year stints in Colombia and Costa Rica.
This idea of retirement, you also mentioned, is somewhat unique to the United States and to Northern European countries.
Affluent countries, I'd say.
That in Latin America, there isn't quite the same idea of the goal of reaching retirement years when we can do almost anything we want.
No, I would say the culture of retirement, in my experience, is almost entirely lacking in Latin America. Naturally, Latin America is not an affluent society. Their people need to work as long as they can, and they do. And when they finally cannot work any longer, they stay with family, their grandma, their grandpa, and they play with the grandchildren, and so forth. Naturally, there are some people who have means who can retire in retirement homes and so forth, but that's not the usual thing. Nor do you constantly hear the talk about, now, what will we do when we retire? Not at all.
You both mentioned to me that you think the word retirement probably is not a real good word to describe this time in life. And Sister, you referred to time as a process of new experiences.
I think life is a total process of development, and retirement gives a kind of a false idea, because the word retirement means to withdraw, and we don't want to withdraw from that total development, spiritual development and intellectual development, when the time comes when we might be leaving the profession that we have been working at over a lifetime. So I think we need to refocus and to look at what is going to take place now that will continue me in this path of development.
I think there are a lot of myths about retirement or refocusing. I was talking to 2 teenagers today and telling them I was going to have you on this program. One teenager, Laura, is 14, and the other teenager, Rhea, well, she's almost 13, so almost a teenager. And I was saying to them, when you get to those years of life when you no longer have to work, here they are in junior high school, Keeling Junior High School. They said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to go traveling. And I think there are a lot of those myths that people think, well, what I'll do is I'll get involved in doing some more things for me. I won't have to go to the office. I won't have to go to work every day. I can just do things for me. But that's kind of almost a dead-end street, isn't it, Sister?
I would consider it a dead-end street. I think we need to be involved with people in one way or the other. Now, we may continue some self-development through activities that are personal and relaxing and leisurely. But if that's the total focus, then I think we're not going to really get the enrichment out of these golden years that we really deserve and desire.
You've been an educator.
That's right.
Tell our Austin Faith Dialogue viewing audience a little bit about your years as educator and what brought you to Austin, Texas.
I have been an educator as a secondary school teacher, as a secondary school administrator, and also as a college professor. I was recruited by the president of St. Edward's University with a team of 5 to come to set up a college for women on the St. Edward's campus. It was to be a coordinate college. But at the end of 3 years, we realized that that probably wasn't the wisest route to go, and so we became a coeducational institution. It was very challenging to move into a totally male institution and to say, these are the needs of women, and what are we going to do about it? It was a real challenge, but it's been a very fulfilling work.
You mentioned the word challenge, and it seems to me that if we're going to take out the word retirement, and we purposely, Dr. Offerkamp, we did not say retired seminary professor, rather seminary professor, because you have in our conversation helped, as Sister has, to recognize that this is really a time of challenge, a time of refocusing, of looking at new opportunities. And after you received and earned your doctorate at the University of Texas, and then decided after 29 years that you were going to say, am I correct on that, 29 years?
To retire?
Yes, And then you decided you would go into, well, the bishop said, right?
Well, it wasn't quite 29 years, no, a little bit, backtracking a little bit. I was in the Austin Diocese at the university for 4 years when the administration suggested that I complete my education, which I did. And I was very interested in the education of teachers, particularly language teachers. And I realized that not much was being done to prepare teachers for bilingual children. So my doctoral dissertation was designing a curriculum to prepare teachers for Spanish-speaking children at the elementary level. And I did that then for 20 years or more, 25 years really, until I retired from teaching.
So there was that end of that part of your professional career, that retirement came, but then a new challenge, a new opportunity came. You didn't just sit back and say, well, now I'm going to do a leisurely type of lifestyle.
No.
What happened? Tell the
What
Faith
happened?
Dialogue.
What happened was like a blessing out of heaven, because I knew I was getting to the age where I knew it would be time to consider giving up teaching. And I had been exploring, but I wanted to be involved in some way with people, for sure. And then we had a new bishop who arrived in Austin, and he drafted me to be his vicar for religious. The day that that was confirmed was like a gift of the Holy Spirit. This was the answer to my question of retirement.
Yeah, God said, refocus, sister.
Refocus, that's right. So I spanned 2 agencies for a couple of years, and then decided now is the time. Now was the perfect time to be comfortable in giving up my educational affiliation and to go on and work at this to my heart's content.
Pastor Hofferkamp, the same thing happened for you then, as you were a seminary professor in Mexico, I believe,
Mexico.
And you looked at your life and decided, well, it's time now for me to do some refocusing. Tell us about that.
Yes, I had been in Mexico before for a period of about 15 years, and then we were gone 6 years in Central and South America, and had the opportunity to go back to Mexico then from 86 till 93. And as 1990 rolled around and so on, I thought, we need some new blood here. We need some fresh faces. I shouldn't inflict myself on my students forever, perpetually, so I thought that when 65 came, this would be time to think about retirement, and I thought, let's let another year roll by. And when the other year rolled by, I said, good. This is time, and my students, while I'm still more or less fresh, can look back on their experience with me with pleasure, and I can do the same. And now I can go on to some more experience, let's say, in Austin, Texas.
You know, and I think the key there, sister, from what Dr. Offerkamp just told us, is that you were going on. You
Yes.
said, I'm going to move on to something else. And you chose Austin, Texas. And
Yes.
why Austin, Texas?
Well, for about 3 reasons at least. In the first place, here we have the Lutheran Seminary program of the Southwest, and I had been in contact with them for some time, and they had told me that I could do some teaching for them in my retirement, so that was the first drawing point. The second was that my wife is originally from Dallas, Texas. She has many relatives there, and also her aged parents live in retirement in Monterrey, Mexico, and we're here in Austin. We're about midpoint in between the two cities. And in the third place, a number of years ago, our eldest son and his wife moved to Austin, and they have since given us a grandchild, and so that was the third big center of attraction for Austin.
What I keep hearing you say in this part of our program together, when you talk about refocusing for the religious, those who live their lives within faith community, that the element of people is so important, that even as you look at this time of your life, you make those kinds of decisions based upon not necessarily climate, although they may be something that you are offered in Austin, Texas, but also the relationships of life. Sister, what about for you as you think about your lifestyle in those golden years?
It's definitely people-oriented. And my work is by its very nature people-oriented. And I enjoy meeting new people, people that I didn't meet in an academic setting, over a larger expanse of territory. I'm looking at people in terms of different needs and different interests, and I'm getting involved in lots of auxiliary activities that are related to the work, not directly connected with it, but related to it, that gives me a chance to use some of the skills, if I can use that word, that I acquired in the course of my professional career, and to use them in a different way, and to be challenged by that.
It sounds to me like you both enjoy this refocusing time, that it's giving you some opportunities for expressions that maybe you didn't have when you were doing your regular vocation, your regular work. And when we come back in the second part of the program, we're going to talk a little bit about Austin Metropolitan Ministries for our Faith Dialogue viewing audience. But after we come back, what I'd like to talk about are some of the steps that people can take, some of the steps that the religious people take, those who serve. You've served well for over 50 years and over 40 years in your various faith communities. Now we want to come back and talk a little bit about some of the steps that they have to go through, the people who have served us so well in preparing for this time of refocusing. And we hope you'll stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue as we talk about refocusing for those of the religious community.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, and we've been talking about those who are a part of the religious community, and when they reach that time of their lives after serving their faith communion so very well that they decide to go in other ways of refocusing their life. And what I thought about during the break is that you're having fun. You're enjoying this time. You know, some people look at retirement as being kind of that death sentence. What am I going to do? Where am I going to be? What's going to happen to me? And there is naturally some apprehension. What are some of the things that you could say that, having been in faith communities for over, well, we said before we came on the air that you represent almost 100 years of service to faith communities. What are some of the steps that are important? Sister, what are some of the things people in the religious community look forward to?
I think first, in looking forward, we need to taste some of the experiences that would be fulfilling for us. We all have different personalities, different gifts, different experiences. And so we ought to look around and try out a few things to see if Those are going to be things that we want to be engaged in ministry. Maybe people that we've worked with will help us do that. Or we may have to just go out on our own. Volunteer services abound in the community, and we could try out some of those and see. I think it's important that we be able to use some of the gifts that we've developed in professional ministry in this new venture.
When you counsel or listen to the religious, you're vicar for the religious, for the diocese, when you talk to them, do you try to emphasize to them to do that before they get to that place where they're going to retire, so to speak? Do you encourage them to go out and taste some of the areas where they can continue their ministry?
I suggest it. I don't do a lot, actually, in counseling retired religious. Many religious in our community come from areas outside this particular diocese, and so their formal retirement may be out of state. So we don't have a large number of retired religious. We do have 2 communities that have retired religious here. They're both male communities. So I can't say that I do a lot. It's more informal, you know, suggesting, would you like to try this? I find, however, that most religious personnel are pretty resourceful in looking at these opportunities.
Because they see themselves, and this might be a gift that the religious can give to the entire community, they see themselves involved in, and a word you've used frequently, Sister, has been in ministry. Dr. Offerkamp, when you were thinking about your retirement and moving to Austin, Texas, you came because there was a seminary here, a Lutheran seminary, and so you saw yourself continuing in that. You were going to taste that expression. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's right.
What are some of the other things that you're doing in your refocusing that you didn't have an opportunity to do before?
Yes, well, particularly I was looking forward to my retirement to having a time in which I could do some writing. And that's what I've been doing quite a bit of lately. Just in these days, I'm finishing up a course in Christian ethics, which I was asked to write in Spanish. All my writing is now done in Spanish for the use of Lutheran seminary extension programs in Latin America. And I was asked by a colleague in Bogota, Colombia, a couple of years ago to write this. So I wasn't really able to do much writing in my active years. Well, active years south of the border,
right.
In that setting. And now that I don't have to punch a time clock anymore, generally, I can do this. And I've written a number of papers, other papers in Spanish, and I have a number of projects on the board, a book or 2 that I would like to get done. And also, I might add that in your own congregation, church, I do a little ministry in Spanish. We have a small group at Gethsemane Church, and that meets every Sunday, and I preach and celebrate Holy Communion. When I'm asked to do so, I will do so this Sunday, and that also is very fulfilling for me.
What I hear you saying, both of you, is that this idea of continuing ministry and to have the freedom to get involved in a variety of new opportunities, because, as Sister, you said, there are all kinds of volunteer opportunities out there, and that retirement is not a time to pull back, but retirement is really a time to jump into a new season of life, a new opportunity for life. But there are some fears and concerns that people often have. And one of the things that I listen to would be, well, money. What about in your tradition, in your faith communions? The people who watch Austin Faith Dialogue frequently are people who are involved in the religious community, and they're concerned about those who have served and served well for years and decades. And that's one reason we wanted to do this program, is to remind them to continue to support those who are the retired or refocusing ones. What about the aspect of money in retirement?
For religious personnel, I'm talking about members of religious congregations now, that is a serious concern. And it became a crisis situation about 10 years ago when religious communities realized that they had never been able to set aside any money for retirement. They lived on subsistence salaries. Most of our people served an immigrant community over several generations. And so the income was not adequate to even think about retirement funds. It became a crisis situation about 10 years ago, And so the bishops of the country met with the superiors of the religious congregations to come up with some kind of a plan to make up for this deficit. The assessment was in the billions. A campaign, a national campaign to cover 10 years was set in progress or in motion, and an annual collection is taken throughout the country to contribute to this retirement fund. While the fund has averaged about $25 million a year, it's barely scratching the surface. However, it is, it is helping tremendously. In the meantime, another aspect of that was that we should take a strong look at the compensation that is provided to religious in ministry now, so that that will not be a problem of the future. So it's a two-pronged program.
So in your tradition, they have recognized the need for compensation in this time of refocusing for those who have served for decades
That's
within
right.
the faith community.
That's right.
Dr. Offerkamp, you come out of the Lutheran tradition.
Yes.
What about their preparation for retirement for people such as yourself?
Well, in my own case, at least, over 40 years ago, going on 43 years ago when I was ordained, I immediately joined Social Security. And a couple of years later, it became obligatory, mandatory for clergy, ordained clergy, to enter Social Security. And so we have that. And then also my own church had, at that time, and continues to have, of course, its pension program for clergy, and I've been fully vested in that. And so my compensation is covered by Social Security and by the retirement pension from the church.
One of the goals of this program, when I talked to our producer, Steve Ross, about the program, is that I wanted to hold up in front of the viewing audience the need of being aware not only of this refocusing that you described so very well, but also of the need to be aware of the financial compensation for those who have served the faith communities well in a variety of denominations and religious expressions, so that those of you who are continuing to enjoy life, that you can also have that type of financial security that allows you to go out and volunteer, that allows you to be able to do those things that maybe in your active ministry you weren't able to do. Another concern, I think, is the area of health. Is there anything that you can say to the viewing audience and also to those of the religious community about the issue of health?
I see two things. First, there's the aspect of health which you cannot control, and then there's the aspect of health which you can control. And so in terms of the aspect of health that you can control, I think we need to be aware of proper diet, exercise, not just sitting in the rocker with my feet up reading a book. These are things that we can control and give us a sense of well-being that I think is critical for these last years of our life.
I think that's the point you made, Dr. Offerkamp, that in Latin America, it seems that's a much healthier approach to life, is the continuum, this idea of staying active. There it's necessitated by the economic realities.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
the whole idea of staying active and not becoming sedentary and sitting around, because there is that idea, I think, that is in our society that, well, I can just sit back now and relax. I hear you saying that the religious don't think that way so much. They're thinking more about continuing their ministry.
I think so. I believe that's correct. And as far as the health aspect is concerned, I would say, I think it's largely true that you are as young as you feel. And I do not feel old. I know that. And I hope that I continue to think of myself as being somewhat young. And I think I agree. The necessity, the need for proper exercise. I think a methodical life, time set aside for exercise, for work and study, relations with other people, adequate sleep, and I think you're pretty well taken care of. Yes, I believe so.
How do you go about dealing with the idea that we've talked about on the program, that when you reach retirement, that's kind of the end now, that you don't have anything to do? What can you say to the retired religious, that there's still a reason for them to be involved? And how can we sensitize the communities of faith, if you will, to involve the retired in ministry? Are there any ways that they can be aware of that to sensitize them, both the retired and the congregational communities?
I think we could sensitize the congregations to the fact that it would be a good idea to invite retired religious to be part of the community, that their services have been appreciated and that they would like them to continue. They're wanted, in other words. They're not put back on the shelf. And I think that would be very, very helpful in terms of boosting the morale of a retired person particularly, who feels that with the loss of my ministry, I am no longer the fulfilled human being that I was.
The idea that you've lifted up so much in this program is that we don't necessarily lose our ministry or our purpose for living unless we start to think that way, unless we start believing that way. And maybe that's truly the gift then, that the retired religious, and there I am saying that word again, you've got to help me get another word, but those who have reached that time following decades of service can give to the community of faith, to kind of rattle the cages of the congregational communities and say, we're here and we continue to want to serve in some way. Dr. Offerkamp?
Yes, in my own case, I feel that the main difference between before and after is I no longer have to punch a time clock.
That's
But
wonderful.
I have,
That's wonderful.
I have time at my disposition, at my disposal, and I am using it, I hope, for further ministry. And so, in a sense, my life is just beginning.
That's
Without
the
constraints, without the big constraints.
The freedom
The
without...
freedom to arrange your own time, even if you're employed, as I still am, but I am free to arrange my own time. And that's a marvelous blessing, not to have to punch a clock, not to have to meet all kinds of deadlines. I do have to meet some deadlines, but I can control the way in which I meet those deadlines.
We're thankful that you allowed us to be a part of your life story. And for you in the Austin Faith Dialogue audience, I'd like to remind you there's a time for every season, and this is the time to live. Please invite the retired religious, those refocusing, to live their lives in your community. You'll benefit and we'll all be enriched. Thank you for watching Austin Faith Dialogue. Peace be with you.
Call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472